I was in the middle of folding a pair of khakis when my phone buzzed on the dresser. I figured it was my son-in-law confirming the rental car details. We were leaving for the airport in 3 hours. A week in the Smoky Mountains. My idea, my planning, my credit card. I'd booked 2 adjoining cabins at a resort outside Gatlinburg back in February, when my daughter had called me excited, saying how she and her husband hadn't had a real vacation in years. I remember hanging up that night feeling useful, feeling like a dad. I picked up the phone and read the message from my daughter. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the trip. Can you call me?" Something about the punctuation felt off. No emoji, no love you, just that flat, careful sentence. I called her. She picked up on the second ring and started talking before I could even say hello, her voice bright in that practiced way she had when she was delivering bad news she'd already decided on. "So, Dad, I've been talking with my husband, and we think it might be better if this trip was just the 2 of us. You know, some time for our marriage. We really need that right now." I stood there holding a pair of khakis I'd bought specifically for this trip. "Just the 2 of you," I said. "Yeah, I hope you understand. It's not personal." "I want to tell you," I said, something dignified, something measured and calm. What I actually said was nothing for about 6 seconds, which felt like a month. "I booked those cabins in February," I finally said. "Both of them. I've been paying the deposit installments." "I know, and we really appreciate that, Dad. We can figure out the money stuff later." The money stuff. I had spent just under $9,000 between the 2 cabins, the flights, and the activities I'd pre-booked. A whitewater rafting excursion, a dinner reservation at a place with a 2-month wait list, a surprise horseback ride I hadn't even told them about yet. $9,000 and 6 months of looking forward to something, and she was calling it the money stuff. "Your husband decided this?" I asked. A pause. "We decided together." I knew that pause. I'd known it her whole life. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" She sounded surprised, like she'd expected more of a fight. "I heard you," I said, and I hung up. I need to back up, because this story doesn't make sense without the last 4 years. My wife passed in the winter of 2020, 41 years of marriage, and then she was gone in 6 weeks. A diagnosis, a hospital, a room that smelled like recycled air, and then a Tuesday morning when I woke up and she wasn't anywhere in the world anymore. I won't dwell on that. I'll just say that when something like that happens, you reach for whatever family you have left, and I reached for my daughter. She was living 2 states away at the time in Charlotte with her husband. I'll call him my son-in-law because that's what he is even now, and because using his name would make me say things I'd rather not say in polite company. They'd been married 2 years. I didn't dislike him when they first got together. He was confident, had a firm handshake, talked a lot about his plans. I mistook that for ambition. It took me a while to understand that talking about plans and actually executing them are 2 very different skills, and he had mastered only one. 6 months after my wife passed, my daughter called and said they were thinking about buying a house but weren't sure they could qualify for the mortgage on their own. My son-in-law's credit had some issues. He'd explain them to me later in a way that managed to blame 3 different external forces and never once mention himself, and my daughter was between jobs. They'd found a place they loved, a 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood, priced at $260,000. I co-signed the mortgage, and because the down payment was going to stretch them, I covered it, $40,000. I told myself it was an investment in their stability, which is the kind of thing you tell yourself when you're lonely and your daughter is the last person on earth who shares your wife's laugh. Over the next 3 years, I paid for other things too. A car repair when the transmission went. 2 months of their mortgage when my son-in-law's contracting business had a slow quarter, which seemed to happen a lot. A new HVAC unit, the kind of expenses that accumulate quietly, that you don't add up because adding them up would require you to look at something you're not ready to look at. I moved to Charlotte 18 months ago. My daughter suggested it. She said it would be nice to have me closer, and I wanted to believe that. I bought a small house 20 minutes from theirs. I was at their place most Sundays. I picked up the check at dinner more than I didn't. I babysat their dog when they went away for a long weekend, a trip I hadn't been invited on, but I told myself that was fine. Young couples needed space. I was good at telling myself things were fine. After I hung up the phone that morning, I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at the open suitcase on the floor. I'd packed sunscreen. I'd packed the good hiking boots I'd bought at REI in March. I had a waterproof phone case clipped to the side zipper because I was going to be on a raft and I wanted to take pictures. I sat there for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I got out a legal pad. I'm old enough that I still think better on paper, and I started writing down numbers. The down payment, 40,000. The 2 slow quarter mortgage months, 4,200. The car transmission, 3,100. The HVAC, 6,800. Various dinners, groceries, smaller things I could remember, somewhere around 5,000. The Gatlinburg trip, 8,900. I stopped writing when I got to $62,000, and I hadn't even tried to remember everything. $62,000, and my son-in-law had decided I wasn't family enough to come on a vacation I had planned and paid for. I looked at that number for a while, then I picked up my phone and called my bank. Here's something about me. I am not, by nature, a vengeful person. I taught high school history for 31 years. I coached junior varsity baseball for 12 of those years. I am the kind of man who brings a casserole when a neighbor is sick and means it. When my wife was alive, she used to say I was too easy on people, and she wasn't wrong. I gave second chances like they were free. But I had also been a homeowner for 35 years, and I understood paperwork, and I understood that my name was still on that mortgage in Charlotte. The bank confirmed what I already knew. As a co-signer, I had certain rights and responsibilities tied to that loan. I had a long conversation with a mortgage specialist that afternoon. I took notes on the same legal pad. I asked specific questions. I thanked her by name when we finished. Then I called a real estate attorney. I want to be honest about my state of mind at that point. I wasn't in a rage. I was something quieter and colder than rage. I was tired. Tired of being useful and invisible. Tired of the way my daughter's voice had gone careful and practiced on that phone call. Tired of the way my son-in-law had apparently sat across from her and decided that the man who signed for their house wasn't worth a seat at the table. I was 63 years old. I had buried my wife. I had handed over chunks of my retirement savings because I loved my daughter and because I thought that love was mutual. And somewhere along the way, I had become someone they called when they needed something and didn't call when they were making plans. The attorney was thorough. She walked me through my options. I asked her what the process would look like if I needed to exit my co-signer position. She explained it. I asked follow-up questions. I paid for a full hour of her time, and I felt every minute of it was worth it. My daughter called me 2 days later. They were at the cabin by then, the one I'd booked. In the mountains I'd been looking forward to seeing, paid for with my credit card that was still on file with the resort. "Dad, there's something wrong with the card," she said. "The resort is saying a charge didn't go through." "That's correct," I said. Silence. "What do you mean, that's correct?" "I mean I contacted the resort and removed my card from the account. I also cancelled the rafting excursion and the dinner reservation since those were booked under my name." Her voice changed. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm figuring some things out," I said. "I'll be in touch when I have more to tell you." I heard her say my name as I ended the call. It was the most present she'd sounded in months. My son-in-law called 40 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. His message was not polite. He used the word unbelievable 3 times, which I found interesting because I thought what I had done was extremely believable. I thought it was, in fact, the most logical response to a situation he had created. I did not call him back. What I did instead was drive to a nursery on the east side of town and buy 6 tomato plants for my backyard because it was the right time of year to plant them, and I had been meaning to do it since April. I spent the afternoon in the dirt with my hands, which is something my wife always said was good for a person. She was right about most things. The following week, I met with my attorney again. The process of extricating myself from the mortgage was not fast, these things rarely are, but it was in motion, and having it in motion felt like setting down a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. My daughter came to my house the Thursday after they got back from their trip. She knocked on the door and I let her in, and we sat at my kitchen table, which is where the real conversations in my life have always happened. She looked tired. She also looked, for the first time in a long time, like she was actually looking at me. Not through me, not past me, not at the version of me that existed to solve problems and provide resources. She looked at her father. "I didn't know he was going to ask me to uninvite you until 2 days before we left," she said. "I should have said no. I didn't. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I don't have a good answer. I think I was scared of the fight." I nodded. I appreciated her saying it. I also knew that understanding why you do something wrong is not the same as not doing it. "I want to ask you something," I said, "and I want you to actually think about the answer before you give it to me." She nodded. "Do you know how much money I'd given you and your husband since you got married?" She was quiet for a moment. "Not exactly." "More than $60,000, I said. "Probably more than that, if I sat down and really counted. I don't say that to make you feel guilty. I say it because I want you to understand that I did not give that money because I expected anything back. I gave it because I love you. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being your father and started being a resource. And when your husband decided I was inconvenient to have on this trip, you didn't push back. That tells me something about how both of you see me." She had tears on her face by the time I finished. She said, "Dad, I'm sorry." And I believe she meant it. But I also believe that people show you who they are under pressure. And what she had shown me was that when the pressure came from her husband's direction, she folded. I told her I needed time. She left. And I sat at that kitchen table for a while in the quiet that has been the background noise of my life since her mother died, and I just let myself feel how tired I was. The mortgage situation resolved over the following months in a way I will not detail entirely, except to say that my daughter and her husband had to refinance without me as a co-signer. That required them to qualify on their own, which required some scrambling on their end that I was not privy to. My attorney handled the communications. I made no dramatic announcements. I simply and quietly withdrew a level of financial support that I should probably never have extended in the first place. My son-in-law sent me an email that was 2 paragraphs of anger and 1 paragraph of something that might have been an apology if you squinted at it. I read it twice and did not respond. Some things don't require a response. They just require you to stop engaging. My daughter and I have spoken several times since then. The relationship is not what it was, but honestly, I'm not sure what it was before was entirely real. What we're building now is slower and more honest, and I think that might actually be better in the long run. She calls me now, sometimes just to talk, not to ask for anything, just to check in. It's a small thing. It matters. I want to tell you what I did with myself in the months after all of this, because that part of the story is the part I'm most proud of. I signed up for a woodworking class at the community college. I'd always wanted to learn and never made time. The instructor was 26 years old and had sawdust permanently embedded in his forearms and the patience of someone twice his age. I was the oldest person in the class by about 15 years. I did not care at all. I booked a solo trip to the Smoky Mountains. Different resort, different time of year, paid for entirely by me with no one else's name on anything. I did the hike I'd been wanting to do for 20 years, a trail called Alum Cave that takes you up through rhododendron tunnels and past this dramatic cliff face that looks like something from a movie. I stood at the top and ate a granola bar and thought about my wife, who would have complained about her knees the whole way up and loved every minute of it. I also got a dog. His name is Biscuit. My daughter named him when she was little, and I remembered she'd always called stray dogs Biscuit, any stray dog, every time. And he is a 7-year-old beagle mix I adopted from the Humane Society on a Wednesday afternoon, when I went in intending to just look. He has a grey muzzle and a stubborn streak, and he sleeps at the foot of my bed and snores loud enough to wake me up sometimes. I don't mind at all. I'm 63 years old. I have more good years ahead of me than I sometimes remember to count. I spent too long making myself small and useful in ways that made other people comfortable and made me invisible. I am done with that. My house has tomatoes in the backyard. There's a half-finished outside table in my garage that I built mostly myself, with the instructor's help on the dovetail joints. Biscuit is asleep under my desk right now, making a sound like a very small engine. I'm exactly where I am supposed to be. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened. Not just the phone call, not just the trip I never took, but the whole shape of those 4 years and how I let them unfold the way I did. The thing about being a generous person is that nobody warns you how easy it is to confuse generosity with surrender. I told myself I was helping my daughter build a life. And I was, but I was also making it very easy for her and her husband to never have to look directly at me, not as a person with my own needs and limits, but as a resource. A co-signer, a backup plan. When you make yourself that available for that long, people stop seeing you, not because they're evil, just because you've trained them not to have to. What my son-in-law did, deciding I wasn't worth a seat on a trip I funded, was wrong, but I've thought about my own role in it too. Every time I covered a mortgage payment without a conversation, every dinner check I picked up without mentioning it, every time I said don't worry about it when I actually did worry about it, I was teaching them that I didn't require honesty, that I'd absorb whatever they needed and ask for nothing in return. I did that. I own that part. The intelligence I'm most grateful for now isn't the kind that helped me understand the mortgage paperwork or know which questions to ask the attorney. It's the quieter kind, the kind that finally let me sit at my kitchen table with a legal pad and look at $62,000 written out in my own handwriting and think clearly about what it meant, not with bitterness, just with clarity. Seeing a situation as it actually is, not as you wish it were, is one of the hardest things a person can do. I didn't manage it until I was 63 years old and alone in a house I'd moved to for someone else's benefit. And the part that took the most out of me wasn't the phone call to the bank, or the attorney meetings, or even the conversation at my kitchen table, where my daughter finally looked at me like I was a person again. The part that took the most was deciding, after all of it, not to become hard. It would have been easy. $62,000 and a vacation I ate alone is enough to make any man seal himself off. But sealed off is not the same as healed, and I'd already spent enough years in my wife's absence learning the difference between those two things. I planted tomatoes. I learned to cut a dovetail joint badly and then less badly. I adopted a beagle with a grey muzzle who didn't care what I'd been through as long as I fed him on time. I booked a trip to the mountains I'd been wanting to see for 20 years, and I went alone and I stood at the top of a trail and ate a granola bar and I was fine. Better than fine. What I know now is that the life I was living before that phone call, useful, invisible, endlessly available, wasn't a full life. It was a holding pattern. Sometimes it takes something sharp and sudden to knock you out of a holding pattern into something real. Biscuit is snoring under my desk right now. The tomatoes came in better than I expected this year. I'm not who I was. I'm not sure I'm done becoming who I'm going to be. But for the first time in a long time, that feels like a good thing.